At 34, Emma believed she had built a life of harmony and stability. Married to her husband Jake for over 5 years, she felt content navigating the delicate balance between her personal and professional commitments. Emma worked closely with her father, a well-known real estate tycoon, managing operations in his rapidly expanding business empire. Although she wasn't at the forefront of the company's strategic decisions, her administrative role gave her a sense of purpose and preparation for the day she might take the reins. Jake, 35, on the other hand, had a vastly different trajectory. Working long hours for a small logistics company, his job was physically demanding and often left him exhausted. While Emma admired his dedication, Jake couldn't help but feel overshadowed by her family's wealth and influence. Despite Emma's efforts to downplay her privileged background, Jake harbored a quiet resentment. He would occasionally make sarcastic remarks about her easy life, though Emma brushed them off, hoping it was harmless frustration rather than deep-seated bitterness. Their relationship had begun with mutual affection, sparked by a chance meeting at a friend's barbecue. Emma had been drawn to Jake's humor and laid-back attitude, a refreshing contrast to the intensity of her work life. However, over the years, the cracks in their partnership began to show. Jake's insecurities and Emma's inability to address them openly created subtle but growing tension, one that neither of them fully acknowledged. Unbeknownst to Emma, the foundations of their marriage were about to be tested in ways she never anticipated. Emma and Jake's first year of marriage felt like a honeymoon that never ended. Their bond seemed unbreakable as they built a cozy life together. Jake's light-hearted humor and Emma's calming nature complemented each other perfectly. Jake's parents were warm and welcoming, and Emma's family, despite their affluent background, embraced Jake with open arms. Their days were filled with small joys, sharing late-night conversations, planning weekend trips, and dreaming about a future together. However, as the months turned into years, subtle tensions began creeping into their relationship. The first strain emerged during a family gathering when a relative innocently asked when they planned to have children. Jake's response was light-hearted at the time, but Emma noticed a lingering tension in his eyes. It was a topic they hadn't seriously discussed, assuming it would happen naturally when the time was right. By their second anniversary, Jake started showing signs of impatience. One evening, after Emma mentioned her plans for an upcoming work project, Jake interrupted with an unexpected comment. "Work, work, work. What about starting a family, Emma? Don't you think it's time?" Emma was taken aback but tried to reassure him. "Of course, Jake, I want that too, but we're still figuring things out. It'll happen when the time is right." Jake, however, wasn't satisfied. Over the next few months, his comments became sharper and more frequent. He started quoting statistics about fertility and even suggested Emma should see a doctor, his tone laced with blame. "Most couples conceive within a year," he said one night, frustration evident in his voice. "Maybe you should get tested." Emma tried to stay calm, proposing they both get checked to be sure everything was fine, but Jake's response was cutting. "What are you saying? That it's my fault? Everyone knows it's usually the woman." His words stung, and for the first time, Emma saw a side of Jake she hadn't encountered before. He began retreating emotionally, staying out late and avoiding conversations. When he was home, his tone was curt, and his once playful demeanor was replaced by irritation. The warmth of their first year together now felt like a distant memory. Emma, who had always prided herself on being composed, found herself questioning everything. She started walking on eggshells around Jake, trying to avoid sparking arguments, yet the smallest things seemed to upset him. One night, after a particularly long day at work, Emma came home to find Jake sitting in the living room, visibly annoyed. "Dinner's not ready yet," he snapped. Emma apologized and rushed to the kitchen, but Jake's words lingered. His resentment toward her family's wealth was becoming more apparent. He often made sarcastic remarks, calling her the boss's princess or accusing her of having it easy. Despite her efforts to keep the peace, the cracks in their marriage were widening. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the man she had fallen in love with was slipping away, leaving behind someone she barely recognized. Over time, Jake's behavior became harder for Emma to ignore. His once predictable schedule grew erratic, with late nights becoming the norm. When asked, Jake would casually dismiss her concerns, claiming he was stuck at the warehouse or grabbing drinks with coworkers. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. On one particular evening, Jake stumbled home well past midnight, his shirt rumpled and reeking of perfume that wasn't Emma's. When she questioned him, he snapped, "Why are you always interrogating me? I'm working hard to keep things together, unlike you." His sharp tone stung, but Emma chose to stay quiet, hoping it was just a phase. However, the pattern persisted. Jake's absences became more frequent, and his mood oscillated between distant and offensive. Emma tried to convince herself it was stress from work, but her instincts told her otherwise. Then came the day her suspicions were confirmed. Jake had left his phone on the kitchen counter before rushing out for what he claimed was an emergency shift. When it buzzed with a message notification, Emma hesitated for a moment, but couldn't resist glancing at the screen. The text read, "Can't wait for tonight. Jake Madison." Emma's heart sank. The name was unfamiliar, but the tone was unmistakable. She unlocked the phone using Jake's easily guessed password, only to find a string of affectionate messages between him and Madison. They weren't just coworkers or friends. This was a full-blown affair. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the chat history. Madison, a woman in her mid-20s, seemed to revel in her relationship with Jake, making references to secret dinners, weekend getaways, and private jokes. The betrayal was undeniable. Rather than confronting Jake immediately, Emma decided to gather irrefutable proof. She photographed the messages, saved screenshots of their call logs, and documented anything that could later validate her claims. She wanted to ensure that when the time came, she wouldn't be left with just accusations. She'd have evidence. In the following weeks, Emma maintained her composure, though it took every ounce of her strength. She continued her routine as if nothing had changed, sharing dinners with Jake when he bothered to come home, engaging in polite conversation, and pretending to believe his flimsy excuses. But behind the calm facade, her mind was racing, planning her next steps. One evening, Jake mentioned a work event he needed to attend, leaving Emma alone once again. Instead of staying home, she discreetly followed him, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. Her instincts led her to a small cafe downtown, where she spotted Jake laughing across the table from a woman she instantly recognized from the photos on his phone. Madison was younger, vibrant, and seemingly oblivious to Jake's married life. Watching them together was a painful confirmation of what Emma already knew. She quietly left the cafe, vowing that this betrayal would not break her but make her stronger. Jake had been distant for weeks, his once feigned attempts at connection now completely absent. Emma could sense the inevitable, though she wasn't prepared for how casually he brought it up one evening after an unusually quiet dinner. Jake sat down his fork and leaned back in his chair. "I think we should get a divorce," he said bluntly, not even meeting her eyes. Emma felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by a wave of relief. The man she once loved was now a stranger, and the weight of his betrayal had left her exhausted. She had already prepared herself for this moment. "That's probably the best decision," Emma replied calmly, her readiness catching Jake off guard. He blinked, as though expecting resistance. "You're okay with this?" he asked, his voice tinged with surprise. Emma nodded. "Yes, Jake. I've been thinking about it too. Let's not drag this out any longer." Jake hesitated, perhaps hoping for a dramatic reaction, but Emma's composed demeanor left him at a loss. "Fine," he muttered, standing abruptly. "I'll handle the paperwork. I'll be out of here by the weekend." True to his word, Jake packed his belongings and moved out within days. The house felt eerily quiet, but Emma didn't dwell on the emptiness. Instead, she packed her own bags and returned to her parents' home. Her parents welcomed her with open arms. They had always been protective of Emma, but when she shared the details of Jake's infidelity, their concern turned to outrage. Her father, ever the pragmatic businessman, assured her, "You deserve so much better, Emma. Focus on yourself and the opportunities ahead. We're here for you." For the first time in years, Emma felt a sense of security that had been missing in her marriage. Surrounded by her family's unwavering support, she began rebuilding her life. Work became her anchor, providing her with both structure and a renewed sense of purpose. She threw herself into the family real estate business, taking on larger responsibilities and surprising even herself with her growing confidence. Though her days were long and demanding, Emma found solace in the progress she was making. She realized that she had spent so much of her marriage trying to fix something that was irreparably broken. Now she was free to focus on her own happiness and goals. Months passed, and Emma's life took on a new rhythm. The pain of Jake's betrayal faded into the background, replaced by a quiet determination to thrive. She began attending networking events, connecting with like-minded professionals, and exploring opportunities to expand the business. One evening, while reviewing a proposal late at the office, Emma caught her reflection in the window. She looked different, stronger, more. Jake's departure had been the end of one chapter, but it marked the beginning of something far greater. Emma was no longer defined by the failures of her marriage. She was forging her own path, one step at a time, and she wouldn't look back. After months of focusing on herself and rebuilding her life, Emma decided it was time for a well-deserved break. Her father had suggested she take some time off to unwind, knowing how tirelessly she'd been working since her divorce. Taking his advice, she booked a solo trip to Miami, hoping the change of scenery and warm ocean breeze would help clear her mind. Emma checked into an upscale beachside resort, relishing the sense of freedom as she sipped a refreshing drink in the serene lobby. The stress of the past year seemed to melt away as she gazed out at the sparkling water. For the first time in months, she felt at peace. Her calm was shattered by a familiar voice cutting through the soft hum of conversations. "Emma, wow, what are you doing here?" Emma turned, startled, and there he was, Jake. He looked almost the same, except for the smug smile plastered across his face. Standing beside him was a young woman, her arm draped possessively around his. She couldn't have been older than her late 20s, with meticulously styled hair and bold designer clothes that screamed wealth. "Jake," Emma replied, keeping her voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." Jake's smile widened as he pulled the woman closer. "This is Madison, my wife," he said, his tone laced with pride, as if he were flaunting a prize. "We're here on our honeymoon." Madison extended a manicured hand, her red nails glinting in the sunlight. "Hi, nice to meet you. Jake's told me so much about you," she said with a saccharine sweetness that didn't quite reach her eyes. Emma nodded politely, but Jake wasn't finished. "Madison's father owns Oceanic Holdings," he said, his voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "You've probably heard of them. They're one of the biggest investment firms in the country." The name struck a chord. Emma had come across Oceanic Holdings in her work, but not in the way Jake was implying. Jake chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. Marrying into this family was the best decision I've ever made. Her dad's already helping me set up my own business. Life's been good, really good. Emma met his gaze, her composure unwavering. Oceanic Holdings. I've heard of them, she said casually. Your father-in-law rents an office in one of our properties. My father mentioned something about late payments a while ago. The smirk on Jake's face faltered, and Madison's expression turned cold. What are you talking about? She asked sharply. Emma smiled, calm and collected. Nothing major, just that your company has been behind on rent for months. But I'm sure it's all under control. Madison glanced at Jake, her confidence visibly shaken. Jake opened his mouth to retort, but Emma stood. Enjoy your honeymoon, she said with a polite smile before walking away, leaving them in stunned silence. As she returned to her seat, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Jake's life, built on shallow ambition, no longer held any sway over her. She was free, and for the first time truly happy. Emma watched the tension between Jake and Madison as she delivered her casual yet pointed remark about Oceanic Holdings' unpaid rent. Jake's confident smirk faltered for the first time since their encounter, and Madison's meticulously composed demeanor began to crack. What do you mean, unpaid rent? Madison asked, her voice tinged with both disbelief and defensiveness. Emma crossed her arms, maintaining her calm. Oh, it's nothing personal, she said lightly. It's just that Oceanic Holdings rents an office in one of my family's buildings. My father mentioned some payment delays during a recent business review. Jake's face turned red as he stumbled for words. That can't be right. Oceanic Holdings is thriving. Madison's dad told me everything is running smoothly. Emma raised an eyebrow, her tone sharp but controlled. Really? Because last I heard, their late payments have been piling up for months. My father's even considering legal action if it isn't resolved soon. I'm sure your father-in-law is handling it, though. Madison turned to Jake, her irritation evident. Is this true? Dad's been stressed about finances lately, but he didn't mention anything about unpaid rent. Her voice rose slightly, attracting the attention of a few passers-by in the hotel lobby. Jake's bravado quickly turned to defensiveness. She's just trying to stir up trouble, he snapped, glaring at Emma. You're doing this to ruin our honeymoon, aren't you? Emma laughed softly, shaking her head. Jake, do you really think I care enough to do that? I've moved on, but it's not my fault if the truth makes you uncomfortable. Madison looked increasingly agitated. Jake, is she lying or is this true? If Dad finds out, he'll be furious, she said, her voice sharp. The cracks in their seemingly perfect facade were now unmistakable. Jake stammered incoherently while Madison glared at him, her confidence unraveling. Emma took a deep breath, deciding to end the conversation. I suggest you focus on sorting out your finances instead of flaunting a lifestyle you clearly can't sustain. Good luck. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking confidently against the marble floor. Behind her, she could hear Madison grilling Jake, their voices growing more heated. Emma smiled to herself, knowing she'd regained control of her life. She stood poised, her calm demeanor unshaken despite the chaos swirling around Jake and Madison. She had no intention of staying in their orbit longer than necessary, but Jake's desperate accusations stopped her in her tracks. You're just trying to humiliate me, aren't you? Jake blurted, his voice rising in frustration. All of this, you showing up here, these ridiculous claims. It's just revenge because I moved on. Emma turned slowly, her gaze steady and unwavering. Revenge, she repeated, her tone laced with disbelief. Jake, do you really think I'd waste my time on that? Her words silenced him, but the bitterness in his expression lingered. Madison stood beside him, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger, clearly grappling with the unfolding revelations. Emma took a deep breath, deciding it was time to deliver the truth, the one that would finally sever any lingering power Jake thought he had over her. Since you're so eager to know about my life, let me fill you in. I'm 5 months pregnant, she said, her voice calm but firm. The words hit Jake like a freight train. His jaw dropped as he struggled to process what she just said. Madison's reaction was equally stunned, her eyes darting between Emma and Jake. Emma continued, her tone unwavering. After our divorce, I met someone who genuinely respects and supports me, someone who doesn't see me as a stepping stone or a scapegoat. We got married earlier this year, and now we're starting a family together. Jake's face turned a deep shade of red. You're pregnant, he stammered, his disbelief evident. Emma nodded. Yes, Jake, and in case you're wondering, no, there were never any fertility issues on my end. All those tests I took came back clear. Funny how life works, isn't it? The weight of her words settled heavily in the air. Jake's eyes flickered with a mix of anger and regret, but he had no rebuttal. Madison, however, looked less sympathetic. So what's that supposed to mean? She snapped, her voice sharp. Are you saying Jake's the problem? Emma raised an eyebrow. I don't need to say anything. The facts speak for themselves. Jake clenched his fists, his voice shaky as he muttered, This doesn't change anything. Madison and I are happy. We're building a life together. Emma smiled, but it wasn't out of malice. It was the smile of someone who had truly moved on. Good for you, Jake. I hope you find what you're looking for. Just make sure you're honest with each other, for both your sakes. She turned to leave but paused for a moment. Oh, and about the rent. If your father-in-law doesn't resolve it soon, legal action will be unavoidable. That's business, not personal. I wish you both the best with that. Emma walked away, her head held high. Behind her she could hear Madison's angry voice as she interrogated Jake, but Emma didn't look back. For the first time in years, Emma felt entirely free. She had rebuilt her life from the ground up, surrounded by love, respect, and a bright future. Jake's poor choices no longer held any weight in her world, and the realization of his mistakes was his burden to bear. Emma's comeback wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life and thriving in the face of everything meant to bring her down. The cracks in Oceanic Holdings' glittering facade deepened. Just weeks after Emma's encounter with Jake and Madison, whispers of financial instability, which Emma had hinted at, exploded into public view. A high-profile embezzlement scandal hit the headlines. Reports revealed that millions had been siphoned from the company's client accounts over the past few years, leaving its reputation in tatters. The man at the center of it all? Madison's father, the CEO of Oceanic Holdings. Investigations uncovered a trail of falsified records and hidden debts, leading to a complete collapse of the company's stock value. Investors fled, clients pulled out, and the business that once symbolized Madison's gilded lifestyle was now a sinking ship. Jake, who had tied his fortunes to Madison's wealth, found himself floundering. The life he had so proudly flaunted in front of Emma was crumbling faster than he could comprehend. Without Madison's father's financial backing, their extravagant lifestyle was unsustainable. The luxurious vacations, high-end shopping sprees, and grand honeymoons, all funded by a foundation of lies, were abruptly replaced by creditors knocking at their door. Madison's confidence quickly unraveled as her family's name became synonymous with corporate fraud. Jake, too, found himself the target of Madison's frustration. "This is your fault," she shouted during one particularly heated argument. "You wanted this life so badly, and now look where we are." Jake's attempts to console her only fueled her anger. "I didn't steal that money," he argued. "How was I supposed to know your dad's company was falling apart?" But their relationship, built on superficial foundations, couldn't withstand the storm. Madison's fury turned to cold indifference as she packed her bags and returned to her parents, leaving Jake to deal with their mounting debt alone. Meanwhile, Emma's life was flourishing. She had fully embraced a role in her family's real estate empire, leading high-profile deals and expanding their portfolio. Her pregnancy was progressing smoothly, and her supportive husband stood by her side every step of the way. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, both professionally and personally, as she prepared for the next chapter of her life. The downfall of Oceanic Holdings barely registered as more than a passing update in Emma's busy life. While media outlets swarmed around the scandal, she remained focused on her work and family. If anything, the news served as a reminder of how far she had come, from enduring Jake's betrayal to standing tall in her own success. Months later, Emma heard through mutual acquaintances that Jake had moved back into a small apartment on the outskirts of town, taking odd jobs to make ends meet. The man who once belittled her and flaunted his so-called triumphs was now a shadow of his former self. Emma felt no anger or pity, only a quiet sense of closure. She had reclaimed her life, leaving behind the chaos of her past and embracing a future filled with love, success, and peace. Emma sat on the balcony of her home, gazing out at the serene evening sky. The past few years had been a whirlwind of challenges, heartbreak, and ultimately renewal. As she rested a hand on her growing belly, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her new life was a far cry from the tumultuous one she had shared with Jake. Her second husband, Alex, was everything Jake hadn't been: kind, supportive, and genuinely invested in her happiness. Together, they had built a life of trust and stability, free from the shadows of jealousy and resentment that had plagued her past. Emma's career was thriving as well. Under her leadership, her family's real estate business had expanded into new markets, and she had recently overseen the acquisition of a major downtown property, a deal her father proudly called one of the company's greatest achievements yet. Despite her professional success, Emma valued the quiet moments with Alex the most. Their evenings, cooking dinner together, planning for the baby's arrival, and dreaming of their future as a family, were what filled her heart with peace. Jake had long since faded into the background of her life. After the collapse of Oceanic Holdings and his failed relationship with Madison, he had become little more than a cautionary tale, a reminder of the consequences of selfish and short-sighted choices. Emma no longer felt anger or sadness when she thought of him. Instead, she felt the calm detachment. He had made his decisions, and she had made hers. What surprised Emma most, as she reflected, was not how much her life had changed, but how much she had grown. The woman she had been during her marriage to Jake, a woman who walked on eggshells, doubted her worth, and tolerated disrespect, felt like a stranger. She had emerged from that chapter stronger, wiser, and more certain of her own value. Her phone buzzed beside her, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Alex, texting to say he was on his way home. A smile spread across her face as she typed a quick reply, feeling a warmth in her heart that she hadn't known was possible. Emma knew life would continue to throw its challenges her way, but she also knew she had the strength and support to face them. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace, a peace that came not from external success, but from within. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma took a deep breath and whispered a silent promise to herself to keep moving forward, to cherish the life she had built, and to never settle for less than she deserved again.